All right, now we're unmuted. We're going to switch over. Now the whole world can see us.
Gotta
Excellent.
watch what I say now.
Yes, of course, yes. Hot mic, hot mic. Hot mic. You just got to start screaming it. Shark Week, mother. No, just kidding. That's so good.
People are gonna know what you're talking about when you say that.
We were filming a project. This is how I'm going to start it right now. We were filming a project, and our talent, she had the mic on, and she was. I learned later that this was one of her first jobs, and it was kind of a big deal, and I didn't realize that. She didn't tell me that this was one of her first jobs. So, like, she was psyching herself up. She was like, "You're doing great. They love you. This is good. You got this. Okay, you got it." Like, she was just, like, psyching. And, like, there was a part of me at first, I was like, "Oh, my gosh, that's so sweet. Like, that's so cute." And then later in the day, when she disclosed that, like, this is my first job, I'm like, "What are you doing? No, you should have told me that. Now it's not cute. It's like, yeah, you got to make sure you deliver these lines." Anyway. Hello everyone. How's it going? That's how we're going to kick things off. My name is Steve. Here is Adam. I think I'm pointing in the right direction.
Oh yeah, for me you are.
Yes. Adam's going to be joining me because there's something that I've wanted to talk about, and I know that we've even kind of mentioned this, that we were going to talk about this like a while ago. So I'm happy this week to be talking about licensing. It's time for Tuesday Tips. The effect isn't the same still without like a phone in my face. It just feels like I'm forcing it.
It brought a smile out of me. I like it.
Perfect. So if all is well, hopefully, hold on. I'm just gonna temporarily listen to myself on Facebook, and I just want to make sure. All right, good. We've got audio. I just want to make sure we're good. So yeah, let's talk about licensing, right? So this is kind of a big topic, a heavy topic, and before we dive into anything, right, Adam, you and I both agreed we are in no way experts in this topic, right?
Right. Oh, when you asked me to be on, that was my text back. I said, yeah, I'll jump in, but I'm no way the expert. I'm no way the yes, I think I'm a professional photographer, so I am versed in licensing and I understand it on a
Yeah.
level, but no, I think you need to be a lawyer in creative rights to be a professional or an expert.
Yes. And so with that, right, I want to make sure people understand that. But more of what I wanted this conversation to be about is really just starting those thoughts. So twofold. One, if you're a photographer or just a creator, and you've heard about licensing, but you don't necessarily practice licensing, or maybe you just don't know how to approach it. But then twofold, right? If you're maybe a client, right? Because I almost wanted this to be informative on two levels, right? So if you're a client, you're a creative. Let's say you're a creative director, and you need to hire a photographer, and then they tell you, well, we're going to charge a licensing fee. I want this video to be for both of those people to kind of give just sort of a base level understanding of what that's like and how that's related to photography, but then also potentially, the rest of, the creative industry, because it's not like this is just photography. In fact, I think photography is the industry that people think about it last and are kind of thrown back by, wait, what do you mean? I just can't have everything? So I think that's kind of where I want the conversation to go, is just, hey, just a heads up. Here are things that are in practice. And some people do it, some people don't, but I like to practice the do, and I know you do as well. And I think others should as well, because of the reasons I think that we'll dive into. Fair?
Sounds great.
Sweet. Let's start by talking about, let's just start by talking about copyright, maybe, right?
Sure.
Like, what is copyright? What are rights? What's ownership? So as a photographer, when you capture an image, I'm maybe sending some softballs. When you take a picture, who owns that picture?
Yeah, when you take the picture, you instantly automatically have copyright over that those creative assets, that creative material. So if I hand the phone to my 4-year-old daughter and she takes a picture of the sunset, she owns that image. She
That's
was
hers.
the creator for that image, and
Right.
she can issue a license for Connecticut tourism to sell that image of the beautiful sunset on the Connecticut shoreline.
Yes, and this was a big this was a big story some years back when I think it was a wildlife photographer, or maybe it wasn't even wildlife, but a photographer, the
yes,
monkey.
the monkey.
The
Yes.
monkey, and that the debate was so for those that aren't familiar with the story, a monkey, I think, either grabbed the camera or maybe the photographer willingly handed the camera to a monkey. The monkey took a selfie, and it's an amazing photo. Like, it's such a good photo. Like, it's this monkey has this big smile on his face. Like, it was so good. And then the debate was, well, who owns the picture? Well, because it's the photographer's camera and the monkey didn't necessarily know what they were doing, that, well, the photographer owns it. But then PETA even got involved and said that the monkey had the rights, that the monkey owned it. So it was this whole thing of copyright and ownership. And it's interesting. And there has been a ton of stories within the photo community over ownership and rights, licensing, usage, more specifically some of the stories I can think about, basically celebrities taking pictures and posting them on Instagram, they're just taking them, and then photographers suing and trying to get royalties, and then, there's this pushback of, oh, well, you're stupid, you should be happy that they use your photo. It's like, no, that's not how my business operates. I'm happy, sure, but I also need to get paid. So before I dive into the nitty-gritty of that, I just wanted to mention that because these things come up, but it's nowhere near any kind of like mainstream conversation. The monkey was probably the biggest one.
I think you went from creating an image to like case law in like 2 seconds.
I did.
Just being like the mass range,
and
majority of copyright and licensing is just basically when you're talking to a client, how are you going to use this image?
Right. So yes, and I think, I went from like 0 to 50 real fast. But I think that hopefully then kind of paves a little bit of a way for us to dive into this conversation. So ownership, right? Copyright. And Matt is watching. So what's up, Matt? He just mentioned, you have to register an image in order to own copyright. And then he also mentioned you are automatically the intellectual property creator. So I think with that, right, as you mentioned, if your daughter takes that picture, she created that image. That's her image to do with as she pleases. I think to Matt's point,
intellectual property, that's the word I was looking for.
IP, intellectual property. Yeah. Yes. You are the intellectual property owner of that. But then to Matt's point, and this is maybe diving in, but I just want to mention it based on his comment, you have to registering your images so that they are recognized, so that you are recognized as being the copyright holder in the eyes of the law, right? In the eyes of the U.S. law. So yes, I take the picture, my picture. But if someone takes that image or if it's stolen, I'm diving into that 50 already, but having it registered with the U.S. Copyright Office makes a difference. So before, again, we dive into that, I just wanted to address those comments because those are good points.
And just to let Matt know, and you do own the copyright, even if you don't register it with the Copyright Office.
Yeah.
You have greater, if you go it ends up in a lawsuit or a case, then you have more control and stronger case.
Yep.
If a lawsuit occurs
for damages,
whether or not there was a damage. So you have that, you have that copyright ownership even before you do the register with the Copyright Office. But
yes,
you can strengthen it with registering it.
And again, that topic, right? Keeping in mind what you said at the very beginning, right? Or maybe you didn't say it exactly, but we're not lawyers. So let's just make sure everyone understands that we're not lawyers. This advice, you just, again, conversation, not legal advice. I want to preface that. Steve said, well, you know what? I'm also now saying, don't listen to what I'm saying. But
we don't know what the hell we're talking about. But thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. We're making this all up. This copyright's not a real thing at all. But no, I think having some of those, and let's come back to that, but let's try to maybe go somewhat, I want to call it chronologically, but it's not. But let's maybe try to just make it somewhat linear, right? So
sure.
If I'm a content creator, right, that term is what exists for so many people nowadays, right? Content creators, you might actively be making content or you might passively be making content. Meaning, if you go out to lunch with your friends, you go out to brunch and they make this beautiful drink and you take a picture of it, you just passively created content versus someone who is like, hey, you're going to hire me, I'm going to show up to your restaurant, you're going to make a couple drinks, and then I'm going to actively take these pictures for you to use. So content creators exist everywhere now. And I think it's maybe a little bit more mainstream, right? When regular civilians, right, get news coverage with their phones because everyone has the ability to capture this information, and then they want to license it to a news organization. That's just, again, another example of something that I can think of that's been pretty topical. So when you create content, it's yours, right? You own that intellectual property. And a couple of other things that I wanted to just kind of mention right off the bat when I think about, again, I'm just going to use the term content creator because I think that's a simplified way, but musicians are content creators. Illustrators are content creators, right? You want to call it I guess you would call it a movie production house are content creators. That's where things can get a little bit dicey because who actually owns it, and even the same thing with musicians. Does the record company or does the musician? But I'm just kind of painting this idea for others to think about these things that exist, right? If you take a song or if you want to use a song, you have to license that song. So in photography, it's no different with the images that you create. You want to be able to license them for someone to use. So
yeah, and I like, down to a music level. You think about if I pay $1 for a song on my phone, I'm licensing the usage of that song to be played on a personal level.
yes,
I can't then, I license it on my phone. Does that mean I can then go and put it on a commercial that I created for the, I don't know, the local company that's making a product? No, that's a different licensing.
Right, and that's where when those conversations come up, right? So let's talk about, I guess, licensing at its base as image creators, and then I think creating some other types of analogies with other industries I think is good. So I'm a photographer. Adam, you have a company, and maybe this scenario might completely change, but roll with me, right?
Yep.
You have a company. You hired me. You said, Steve, I have this product, and I want you to take pictures of it. This product is can we use let's call it cookware, right? So I have some cookware, and I want to show people cooking with this stuff. So I want those pictures. Great. Well, you're hiring me. I'm going to obviously do a whole bunch of things to make sure that this photo shoot happens. I'm going to take these pictures, and now we've taken these pictures. And let's say throughout the course of the day, again, I'm painting broad strokes. Throughout the course of the day, I took 50 pictures. I probably took more than that, but let's just say I took 50 pictures. Let's say there are 50 pictures that the client thinks are all really good. They're like, hey, these are all really good pictures. My cookware looks amazing. It looks like people want to buy it, so I want these pictures. Talk me through that process, right, of licensing 50 images, or through that scenario of how you would position to a client. So again, what I'm thinking about right now is if I'm an art director watching this, or a new photographer.
So it's interesting that you're saying it almost as if it's going to happen after the shoot. I think that it's one of the first questions when I'm talking about a project with a prospective client. So let's say, so I'm the cookware creator. I have this spatula you're going to photograph, and I want to hire you. And I say, look, Steve, I'm talking with you and 2 other photographers. Who's going to do my shoot? And I'm telling you my dream photo shoot, and asking you all these questions. How are you going to photograph it? What are your plans?
Yep.
I think one of the most important questions you're going to ask, because it's going to be your question. I'm not going to broach the subject because I want it to be unlimited usage rights. One of the questions you should be asking is, how are you planning on using these images?
How, where, potentially how long, right? Those are all relevant things. But if you start very broadly, like where are you going to use this image? Great, it's awesome cookware, cool. Where is this image going to exist?
Well, we're not quite sure yet, but we want to be able to use them wherever we wish.
Okay, so anywhere. It could be in print, it could be on the website, it could be anywhere, right? So and that's what most people, I think, would want, right? I think that's anywhere. Like, why would I need to tell you? I just want the image. I want to do whatever I want with it. So those, I agree with you 100%, right? Those are absolutely the questions that should be had beforehand. You should be having that conversation to say, how many images do you need? On top of also figuring out, okay, well, what's our shot list? How many pictures are we actually taking? so much of that would go into that conversation, that pre-production conversation before we actually take those pictures.
And also, I wanted to let you know that we partnered with Weber, with this new spatula that I created, and Weber is going to chip in on some of the photo shoots. So, just to let you know, they're going to get some of the images too. You're all right with that, right?
Weber, great, yes, excellent. Weber, so you want to use them, and Weber wants to use them.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
I've definitely heard of Weber. So the reason you bring that up, right, is that makes a big difference. Let's say this is some dude who was on Shark Tank. He invented this awesome spatula, and right. I'm just a dude from a Shark Tank. I'm a startup. How many times have you heard that? I'm a startup, and I just need a couple pictures for my website. Oh yeah, also Weber wants to use them too. The reason why
they were going to give us grills for the shoot as long as they could have images for their social media.
Oh, what a nice trade! what a fair even trade. So we're joking, right? But at the same time, like these are real questions. These are real things that come up and are relevant. And who knows? It might be that your conversation starts off by them saying, you know what, we just need one picture for a banner for our website. Maybe we need 2 pictures to use it. So going back to that scenario that I painted, I took 50 pictures. They all look amazing. Okay, well, we originally agreed that you're only going to need 1 to 3 images. So you've got 50 to pick from. Pick out the 3 that you want, and then you license those images to use them in the ways that we agreed upon you using them. Because what's important about that is if you tell me that you're using this picture on your website only, well, I'm going to come up with a rate that is based off of you using that on your website. Now, to your point, hopefully the conversation happens beforehand where you tell me the partnership with Weber and that they're going to use them. But maybe that comes up after. Hey, we've been approached by Weber and they love what we did and they want to use this image. Then, okay, cool. Well, now I need to have a conversation with Weber or whomever is licensing the images, because now what they're doing is they're not licensing the image from this Shark Tank guy who made the spatula. They license the image from me. So I need to have a conversation with Weber to say, okay, hi Weber, nice to meet you. Where are you going to be using these images? They're going to be on your website? Okay, cool. Now, that same rate that we might have given to the Shark Tank person, that's going to be increased, right? Because Weber is a much, much, much bigger name and has much greater pull, larger reach than this kind of nobody from Shark Tank. I mean, I'm sure it's a cool spatula and all, but I'm just saying.
Well, here's what's interesting, and I like to think of, photographers have their creative fee, for creating those 50 shots, that shooting for the day.
Yep.
And that creative fee should be pretty similar whether you're shooting for the local Shark Tank guy or the new spatula company or for Weber. The difference here is the local spatula guy might spend $5,000 in marketing on that image.
Yep.
Weber might spend $5 million on marketing that image. Now, what's the value to Weber of that image versus what's the value to the local spatula guy? And you have to say, what is the value that I'm offering the company? And you should in turn receive, a financial benefit from the value that you're offering them.
Yes. And I think that's the best way to put it, right? Because it shouldn't be seen as something that is negative, right? It's like, oh, well, it's the same image. It's no different. Why would you charge more to Weber? Well, to the point that you just made, it's arguably more valuable to them. So that's why it's worth more. I mean, and that's, call it supply and demand, but it's not really quite a supply and demand, but their marketing budget is tremendous compared to the mom and pop.
Think of it in this way. My desire is to create content that helps my company succeed. And if my image helps Adam Spatula sell 10,000 spatulas next year, then that's awesome. Then I'm selling that image for maybe $1,000.
Yep.
If my image helps Weber sell 10 million grills next year, that is awesome. But I'm not selling that image for $1,000 for Weber to sell 10 million grills.
No.
It should be correlational to the value that I'm providing the company.
It has to scale. Yeah. It has to scale. And Chris has a question. How do you answer? I think you just put this in. How do you answer the joint clients if they realize Local Guy and Weber are getting the same images for significantly different license prices? I think it. So, Chris, to that point, I think it should be explained the same way that Adam just explained it. I think it should be explained the exact same way in that.
And sometimes you can say, what's do you know what your marketing budget is for this campaign or these images? Do you know what your media buy is?
Right.
And the company might say, oh, my marketing budget for next year is $5,000. And you might look at Weber, and Weber's marketing budget is $40 million. So and maybe their media buy on this one image is they're going to spend $3 million on that image. So you should deserve a percentage of that media buy or that marketing budget.
Yeah.
So it's such a tough challenge on figuring out the value of that image.
Right.
And what are the factors? What are the things that you use to determine, do I charge them, $5,000 for this image, $10,000, $500? They want to pay me $1,500. Is that worthwhile, or should I be charging way more? Who do I approach? How do I figure that number out?
Right.
How do you figure that number out, Steve?
Me, I try to do it based off of who I, the research that I can do on a company. So this is actually something Matt had helped me or shared with me a while ago, is try to Google that company, find information about this company. How long have they been around? Try to see if you can get any kind of information on what they've done, whether they've shared their own kind of profits or their own records or accolades, things like that. If you see that they're successful, that kind of gives you some path to say, well, you know what, then I'm going to make sure that I'm getting, I don't want to say rewarded, but I want to make sure that I'm being compensated based off of the fact that you're doing well. So you should be able to justify the cost for these images that will continue to do well versus, someone who, again, this Shark Tank person, or call it a startup, right?
Adam Coppola.
Yeah, that's right. If they don't really exist and they're brand new and they're just tapping into the market, you have to sort of recognize it's like, okay, well, they probably don't have that budget. Obviously, you can always ask them, and most clients tell you they don't know until after you send them an estimate. You say, what's your budget for this project? Have you done projects like this before in the past? What was your budget for that?
Now, here's what's interesting. When I talk to Adam Spatula Company,
Sure.
my goal is to, you're going to get huge. Everyone who's grilling is going to use Adam Spatula.
Of course.
My plan, I'm probably going to say, my licensing fee for this image is going to be pretty negligible. It's going to be pretty small. I'm doing the creative fee for you. It's a small startup. We're getting in, but I'm probably going to limit the usage duration. So
yes.
My view is you're going to get freaking huge in 2 years. So right now, you can use this image however you want for the next 2 years. And I want you to use it up. I want you to sell as many spatulas as you can. But in 2 years, when you're a multi-million-dollar company and you're spending $5 million using this image, I want to come back to you and say, hey, let's renegotiate the license for this image. Now you're putting it on billboards and you're putting it in Outside Magazine and you're putting
yes.
it all over the place. I think the value of this image is a lot more to you, and I should be compensated appropriately.
Yes, and that's a great point too, right? When you talk about any kind of original license, because again, going back to that thing that we had mentioned before, that you had said, I want to use this thing everywhere. Okay, hold on a second. Using it everywhere means bigger number, right? Using it in a limited amount for a limited amount of time, smaller number. Like it should scale. And if I tell you that, or what in some areas I'll use is, I'll present to them, well, here's a licensing agreement for you to use this image anywhere you want, for as long as you want, in perpetuity, it exists, yours, here you go. But if they come back and say, well, this is beyond our budget, okay, cool, not a problem. If you want to, we can readjust that license to a 3-year or even a 1-year agreement. Or two conversations that I've had recently with startups is, hey, we just started up, we have some funding, that's great, but we can't blow it all at once. Okay, cool, then we'll do a 1-year agreement. So you have this image to use for 1 year, and again, like you said, I hope you do well. I want you to do well so that we can renegotiate and I can say, cool, well, this image is clearly now worth more. You have more, there's more value to it for you, so it's worth more for me. And I think those conversations that, in talking about, limited amounts of images and limited amounts of usage, are conversations that should be had, right? Like, for example, where we kind of currently live in a place where an image on Instagram, in like an Instagram stories, might only maybe exist for a couple of months, right? That image, because companies, I'm just kind of making hypotheticals, companies want new content all the time. So this image, while it might exist on their feed, right, for a lengthy amount of time, but that image might only get used on their Instagram stories for 3 months if they run, some kind of ad campaign with it. And to think about that, it's like, all right, well, yeah, this, you only need this image for a couple of months, then the license can be adjusted to reflect that. Or if you want this image to use it on your Instagram feed, on your website, in your Instagram ad campaigns, and your TikTok and your Snapchat campaigns, like if you want to use it on a billboard, you want to use it everywhere for everything, well, then that number is going to increase.
Right.
The one thing I think that, I've encountered, I encounter it less now, which is good, but I still encounter it where when I have conversations with clients, because I think to your point earlier, right, is that that's what this is that it's all about a conversation. It's all about positioning to a client how you work, how you operate, because conversations that I've had where it's like, oh, well, the last person just gave us all the images. They charged us, to show up, take the pictures, and they just gave us all the images. And I say, well, that is not what I do. If you want to do that, then you're paying a lot of money because, you don't need all the images. You just don't. Like if we take 100 pictures, the goal is to figure out how many pictures do you actually need. Do you need 5? Cool. If I give you 100, chances are that that additional 95 images are some other iteration of those 5 that we were really going for, right? So you don't need 95 more photos. And again, for the art directors listening, for the creative directors listening, you know what you need. You know you need an image for your masthead. You know you need one for your social campaign. Or if you don't know, these are the things that you would want to think about, right? Is where is this image going to go? What do I actually need it for? Instead of shoot a whole bunch and we'll figure it out later, which I've been a part of those shoots. But again, it's all about that conversation beforehand to say, hey, we could shoot a whole bunch of random stuff for the day. You hire me for the day, I'll bring equipment, we'll get some stuff. But then at the end, you're going to license the images that you're going to use. And here is what the fee is going to be per image. So that's very clear, so that when they see that invoice or even that estimate, they understand what it is.
Right.
So it's that repositioning, right? Of, yes, the previous photographer might have just given you everything, instead of me saying, well, they probably shouldn't have done that. They probably should have licensed those images to you, right? Cool, that's on them. That's what they did, but that's not how I operate. Here's how this works. To that point, though, I'm actually curious to see what your thoughts are on like a bulk license. If you've ever done any kind of bulk licensing, if you've ever gotten to a position where you've had to do, although I don't know that, because you've mentioned to me you haven't done a whole lot of product photography, but have you ever gotten to a place where someone wants to license 25, 50 images or more?
Yeah, so there have been certain companies that choose to post-process the images on their own in-house. And it's funny though, it's often when I describe the process, I say, okay, we're going to go out, especially for like a library shoot, where they want a library of assets to market. So we're going to go out and shoot. Maybe there's 1,500 images that we take that day, and I dilute it down to 300. And they see those 300 and they pick 20 that I'm going to post-process, and they're going to deliver the process files, and they're going to license those 20. Now there's other instances where they say, let's shoot. You're going to hand over the images. We're going to edit them. You say 20 or your license, let me know, and I'll issue the license for those images if you want to license more than those 20. Or you could say you can edit however many you wish and use however many you wish. What is the license for that day? I'm okay with saying this is kind of the licensing in my head. This is the licensing fee that I'm hoping to get out of this day. And I'm going to just say that bulk of images, image 1 through 1,500, you have the license to use for 2 years, nationally in any medium. And I'm happy creating a number for that. That's totally fine. I want to work with companies to help them with their current system of working, as long as it's not taking advantage of, my intellectual property in a way that I don't think is fair. If they said, look, usually we work with a photographer who shoots, delivers the images, we edit them and use them as we wish. Okay, I see you want to edit them yourselves. I can totally accommodate that, and that's great. I'm not a big fan of computer time. My skill set is in the shooting and the lighting.
Sure.
Let's figure out a way that I can license that bulk set of images to you in a way that's fair.
Yes.
It's always a discussion. It's always a talking point. There is no cookie cutter scenario that fits every client. It's always a discussion. How can I help you? How would you like to use these images? How can we make sure that you're paying for what you need and not what you don't need?
That's a great point, right? Is to say, if someone says, I mean, and I've had this conversation even with just headshots, and when they say, well, like, can't I just have them all? It's like, how many headshots do you need? 1, maybe 2? Well, let's give you 2. You don't need 5, because again, those other 3 look just like those first 2, but maybe a slightly different pose. So sure, I'll license all 5 to you, but you don't need 5. You need 2. So right, instead of me saying, okay, you want 100 images, here's the number, and they might go, whoa, that's a big number, and you go, well, you want 100 images? It's like, well, I just wanted them all. It's like, okay, well, how many do you actually need? And this is where, right, we then kind of put on the hat of creative director and saying, okay, well, what is it for? Your website? Cool. You need a masthead, or you need a product page. You need an about page. You start to help them figure out. It's like, it looks like you only need 5 or 6 images. And the other thing that I always follow up with is like, hey, we could take 100 pictures, license 5 or 6 now. If you want some of those other ones later, just license those later. They're there. They exist.
And here's a twist on that. I think, I'm not sure it's still in like email negotiation, but I think I lost a headshot job the other day because someone said, what is this restriction of usage, and why, can I only use, and I said, well, remember we had that conversation, where would you like to use this image? And he's like, bio page on my, company website, my LinkedIn, social, all these places. Great. Use those locations however you wish. And that's what the license was for. And he said, well, I noticed there's the restriction in the usage, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. And I explained to him, I said, you're a pretty prominent professional in your field, and you're at the top of your game. There's no reason you shouldn't write a book about all the knowledge that you know and sell 1 million copies.
Yeah.
And this image could very well be on the cover of that book. And I'm sorry, but I cannot sell you this image,
right,
or give you this image and have it end up being on the cover of that book that sells 1 million copies. That's why I need to protect the licensing of the image.
Right.
And, he understood, and he's like, okay, but I don't want to get up to snuff on the legal issues of this. And I said, look, you don't need to. Just let me know how you're planning on using it today, and I'm going to write the license so that it's going to fulfill all those needs today. If you end up writing a book, if some, People magazine wants to feature you as Man of the Year, that's going to be a different license.
Yes.
So I explained it to him. I'm still waiting to hear back. So I don't know if I lost the job or not, but I cannot give him unlimited usage of that image.
And that's a good point, right? There's the license and the usage, right? And they kind of go hand in hand, right? What is the usage, and then that would then determine the license, aka the cost, right? What is the usage, and that determines the license, the length of time, wherever, things like that, and then a cost. Because let's go back to that book, right? Because if they had worked with someone previously and they just said, oh yeah, headshot, $150, here you go, here's the image, and they use it and they print it on the cover of a book, the book sells 1 million copies. Well, now that photographer is out a significant amount of money because they just gave him that image. Now, so be it. I'm sure that happens. But also, the other part of, well, this person, if someone says, hey, headshot, $150, cool. Well, I have this image. Like if you go to like a headshot like event, right, where a photographer, and I've done this before, but even with you kind of want to get a lot of people to come in. Let's do a bunch of headshots. Let me do 20 headshots in a day, 30 headshots in a day. Well, you need to make sure that it's understood that license then says, well, Here is this image to use on like your social media and your LinkedIn page. Cool, done. Well, now that person might just take that image, right, and want to get it printed on a book cover. And if they do, and you then see that image printed on a book cover and you go, whoa, we didn't talk about this. You owe me a lot of money. This would then come back to, right, registering those images. If that image is registered, you then have the ability to file for damages. And again, I'm not a lawyer, although I will also say that I've never registered a headshot image, so I can't even really say that. But that's a scenario. Obviously, you would hope that someone doesn't just do that, but I mean, it's not to say, obviously a book deal where it sells a whole bunch of money is one thing, but also if that image ends up on someone else's website or someone else is using that image, right? The transfer of a license, right? Putting a restriction on saying you can't take the license that I gave to you, or you can't take this image that I gave to you and you can't give it to someone else.
No third party rights.
You don't have the right to do that. So that's where the difference, and I'm kind of reiterating this because that's the difference between ownership and rights and usage. You have the ability to use it here and here only. And to your point, right, for something as simple as a headshot, right, if you want this image to be somewhere else, then, right, if let's say you start a company and you want to put that image up on a billboard, well, now we need to figure out a license to use that headshot on a billboard. And it's tricky. To your point before, is the tricky part is it's like, well, there are some kind of, standard rates. I know we've had this conversation before, right? Standard rates, like, well, how do I know what to charge if he wants to use it on a billboard, or if he wants to use it on a book cover, or if he wants to use it on his LinkedIn page? Like, how do I know what to charge? There is no like solid flat number to say, here's what an image costs on LinkedIn, here's what an image costs on a billboard. It's so relative, right? And I know that you and I have discussed the Getty image calculator as
right.
sort of call it a foundation of at least the discussion, if nothing else, to have with your client. Because as we agree, Getty's numbers are a little inflated, and it's different because that's more of that sort of traditional stock photography kind of license, right?
Yeah, and I love that it's inflated because it helps me,
helps me.
Like a good guy in the situation. Getty would value this image as $2,000 if you're going to put it on a billboard for a month. Look, I understand that's a lot of money, and that's more than you're willing to pay. Personally, I think $1,000 is going to be a great price for you to receive the value of the image and me to gain, compensation for the intellectual property that I'm giving you.
Right.
It's often I always think of sometimes people will say exposure. Look, I'm going to give you exposure. I'm going to put your image on a billboard.
Yep.
And in the bottom of the billboard, it's going to say Coppola Photography. Really, maybe that has a tiny bit of value for me, but I don't think you're giving me as much value as I'm giving you to present yourself and your business in a professional light by using quality imagery. So you always have to understand what's that value scale, and the value to the client should be equal to the value being received to the photographer. And that's the goal here. Is I want to serve you as my client and make you succeed. Yeah. But I'm also hoping that you want me to be able to support my family and continue being a photographer.
Right. And that's right. That just comes down to, it's like, hey, then at that point it's business. Yes, I'm a creative and this is what I do, and it's amazing that this is what I do, and some people don't necessarily understand that, but this is how I earn a living. And if I license this one image to you for you to use for this one purpose, and then you decide you want to use it elsewhere, well, you need to pay me more because it's now holding more value for you. So therefore, you need to pay me for that. There's a couple things that have popped up in the chat, and Chris makes a point of saying so many other creative intellectual property industries license, like film, TV, music, theater, software. So should we. So that's a great point. Software, right? Apps on your phone. You pay $1 to have that app on your phone. Well, you want to just give it to your friend. Well, you can't. They got to pay $1 for it. That's the license. They don't own that software, right? Here's what it costs. Here's $1 for you to have this. You said it before. $1 for me to have this on my phone for me to listen for me personally. Or Spider-Man. Spider-Man is intellectual property. Someone owns Spider-Man. I think it's now back to, I think Fox owns it, or Sony might own it, or maybe it's still Marvel. But I think, no, Marvel released it. So all of that stuff, like if you want to print Spider-Man on your pajamas, cool. You make pajamas, awesome, no problem. You want to print Spider-Man, pony up. Because everyone knows who Spider-Man is, and you're going to sell a lot of those pajamas. So we own Spider-Man, so Spider-Man's going to cost you $10,000 for those pajamas. Oh, you now also want to print them on pillowcases. Cool. Different license, because it's not pajamas. Spider-Man on pillowcases, cool. Another 10 grand, please. Like, intellectual property.
Merchandising.
I mean,
Spider-Man doesn't make their, and if, you know what? That's a great example in terms of photographers don't just make their money on that one shoot. And it's like the shoot is done, you receive compensation for the shoot, and that's the end of your earning power or potential for that shoot. Just like Spider-Man made that movie, and their earning potential isn't done after all the ticket sales of the movie.
No.
Their earning potential is merchandising, all of the Spider-Man ride, the Spider-Man t-shirt.
Video games.
Yeah.
All of it. And even to that, so to that point, let's talk about that for a little bit. That I saw this recently come up in a real estate group that I'm a part of. And one of the photographers there mentioned how what he does is, a listing agent will contact him to photograph a house or an apartment, whatever it is. He'll go in there and take the pictures. Cool. Hey, listing agent, here is your cost to use these images on Zillow or MLS. You got it. Here's that fee. Nice. Well, what this person talked about was what I'm doing is I'm also then identifying who made the lights, who made the cabinets, who did the roofing, who made the pool, who did the landscaping.
You're spot on in that. You know what? That real estate photographer could say, I made $500 on shooting this house, and that, great, I made $500. Or they could say, you know what? I have no houses to shoot today. I'm going to email the landscaping company. I'm going to email the interior designer. I'm going to email, the table maker. All of these different, the bathroom and kitchen designer.
Yes.
There's so many businesses that can benefit from that image.
Yes.
Now,
same image, right? The same image can be licensed 5 times to 5 different people for different uses. So that image, that IP, intellectual property, gets you multiple earnings.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh, that's smart, because I think there is this sort of taboo thought around real estate photography that a lot of people seem like it's just this sort of like grind. You show up for $200, you shoot some pictures, you deliver them, and you move on your way. Obviously, it's probably going to be a pretty nice property in order for you to want to be able to license those images for these types of things. I understand it's a smaller area, but that's the way to start thinking about that when you can, right? If you take these images, where can they be? Where can they go?
So this is an area that gets me so frustrated with wedding photographers and retail photographers.
Sure.
When I say retail, I mean you're providing a service to your individual clients for them to use the images in a personal way.
Yes.
So remember the event, to post them on their wall in their house. Now, right away, the venue says, hey, they come up to you during the event and say, hey,
sure.
I gotta get your information. I'd love to use these images to put on our website.
I bet you would. I bet you would. They're good photos, right?
They want your images. The caterer wants your images. Now, some photographers may say the value that they're offering me is that, every time someone goes to their website, there's a huge, my logo is right there on the image, and I'm receiving 3 gigs a year, 3 weddings a year based off of that image. Great. They're providing enough value for you. Now, some venue might say, hey, we need your images without the logo on it, so we can, put it on a billboard or put it on our website. We don't want your branding on there.
Sure.
But if people ask us, we'll tell them about you.
Oh,
and
sure.
Well, you know what? Now they're gaining more value than you're receiving out of that partnership. And wedding photographers do not seem to understand this. They give, and I think it's lost income. And it's I remember I was almost shunned on a wedding website when I said, no, I don't believe in giving out those images to the planner, the design, the wedding, the gown boutique, all these different florists, everything. I don't think it's a fair trade of value, and I'm willing to negotiate a fair price, $100 an image, just so I can take
Right.
my wife out to dinner,
Yep.
and that would be great. And I definitely want to serve you, and help you out with that. But I think $100 is a fair price to ask for that image.
Yes. And
They said they would be so angry, and they would say, they would never recommend me to anyone if I ever asked for compensation for that image. I think it's lost income.
it's a I think it goes back to you were saying before, like exposure, right? And what's the saying? Exposure compensation is a setting on a camera, not a form of payment.
Yeah.
But to your other point, so both of those points, right? The exposure factor, but then it needs to be equal. So if you determine as a photographer that you having that exposure is valuable enough to you to not be paid, then that's fine. And I think that's where in the wedding world that there is this sort of etiquette that kind of falls in line with like, well, right, I'm gonna let this cake vendor have these images because like it's two pictures of a cake, like what's the big deal, like it's fine. That they'll just give it to them in good faith and hope, but I think there should be that exchange, like you said, either my logo on your website or on watermark on the images. Like that's a reason to have a watermark on your images, is basically to say, hey, I took that picture, or tag me on Instagram. Like absolutely tag me on Instagram. There's value to that.
Put in your asks. Make sure you're receiving value out of that, partnership.
Yeah, and it could just even be a good faith. Like maybe you're a preferred vendor at some venue, so the arrangement that you had. Maybe again it's a handshake, and you say, yeah, of course, I'll take a couple pictures, I'll give them to you. You let me leave my wedding album on the coffee table, so when couples come in, they see it. Like all of that stuff, you need to negotiate all of that. No different than you would negotiate a 1 year, a 3 year, an in perpetuity license for a billboard, for a book cover. All of that needs to be discussed instead of, hey, can I just have some images? And you go, here you go. And then you see your image on a billboard and you go, whoa, what's that about? You're like, yeah, you said I could have it. Like, I'm just gonna use it. That's just promoting my business. Barry made a point. So going back to the real estate, right? He said, sure, but you have to be careful. Homeowners don't like you to license out images of their homes. That realtor is not going to call you again. So to Barry's point, this is again coming back to the etiquette. The homeowner has no say what I do with those images. I created those images. The realtor hired me to take those images. They're mine. I own them. I can do whatever I want with them. But yes, there then comes that etiquette. I need to think about it. Is not being hired again by that realtor worth more or less than me potentially licensing this to a cabinet company, right? It's that trade-off. If I know this realtor is going to give me 30 houses a year, is that worth more than me trying to get a couple extra bucks from these cabinet makers? But at the same time, a homeowner has no say in that. If the homeowner didn't hire me, they don't have a say in what I do with my images. I mean, they could have a say, but legally they don't have any ground to say anything. But you're right. There is sort of this fine line of the call it again the etiquette of things. But again, if it comes down to legality, it's business. Like this is what I'm doing. This is how I make a living. Is I sell my images.
Right. Right. That came into play. There was an interesting issue that came into play. I had done a project for a nonprofit organization where I was able to photograph professional mountain bikers, and it was the usage was for them to use the images in a calendar to promote their nonprofit. Now I had those images on my website, and a supplement brand reached out to me and said, look, we want to associate our brand with outdoor enthusiasts like mountain bikers, climbers. Can we license that image? Now it was tricky where this photo was of a U.S. Olympic athlete. I had, it was never discussed. It wasn't like, I should say the model release that they signed gave me the usage to be able to sell to that company. I knew this athlete well. I felt like I knew, people in the industry well. I had her email. I emailed her and said, hey, here's someone approached me about using the image. They didn't even know about your role as a U.S. Olympic athlete and licensing it for your likeness.
Right.
Because you're a U.S. Olympic athlete, they wanted to license the image because of the mountain biking that was displayed. I want to ask you on honest level, even though my license says I can sell the image to them, how would you feel about me selling the image to them?
Yeah.
Because it's impacting your likeness. She wrote me back a nice email. She said, I love that you asked me this. I really want to support you as a photographer. We have a good relationship, but that's how I make my living, on selling my likeness to companies through sponsorships.
Yeah.
And I can't let you do that. And I said, I totally get it. I'm not going to sell it to them. I want to save face and, keep the relationship viable between us.
Yes.
So there's so many, little facets of etiquette and understanding in this industry that it's challenging at times.
Yes, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, was call it, stock photography. Stock photography, or micro stock as it's probably more commonly recognized today. Stock photography, like if I think back, in my early days as a designer, so like, the 2000s, but more so I think in the 90s, like mid to late 90s, like stock photography, you could earn a solid 6-figure living off of just photographing generic ass shit and just licensing the heck out of it. Because
man in a suit climbing a ladder.
Done. Next, man in a suit climbing a ladder with a hat. Man in a suit climbing a ladder with one arm out, like
with a briefcase.
Briefcase, smiling, checking his phone. Did phones exist? I don't know. Checking his lap, like all of that stuff. Or a gin and tonic, like with a bottle, a glass. Cool. Now make it wine. Cool. Now make it whiskey. Cool. Now make it whatever. Like stock photography, you're just shooting bulk quantity of stuff, right? Coming back to that, you would have something like, if you have people in those photos, right, you need to have an agreement, right? A modeling agreement. You need to have a model release that basically says, I can do whatever I want with this image. I own these images. You have no right. I've paid you to show up and model. I've given you whatever, $100, $500, $1,000 for the day. We did all these man on a ladder shots. Cool. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go sell these images for $100 a piece. And that's how I earn my living, right? So that's where you need to have that agreement. You need to make sure that they know I'm selling your image. You also need a model release, right? So I'm maybe diving a little bit too far into model releases, but this is something that's kind of relevant when you think about, okay, well, if I take your picture, like you said, I took your picture, you're an Olympic athlete and someone else wants to license it, you had the right to do that. You legally had the right to do that, but it then comes down to, okay, well, that's not what its intended use was for, so let me check, and then, you know what, better off, no, I won't. However, if you had just had some random model, let's say you're doing some fitness shoot, right? Let's talk maybe a little bit about spec work, right? So if you just hire a model, hey, I'm going to pay you $1,000 for the day. I'm going to take all these images for my portfolio. I'm going to have you sign a model release that basically says I could do whatever I want with these. Let's say you took all those pictures and then, Nike comes to you and says, hey, that's an awesome photo. I love that. We want to use it in our new campaign. You would love to be able to license that to them. Well, that model signed off basically saying you could do whatever you want with it. Again, depending upon your relationship with that model, you might want to have a conversation, be like, hey, Nike kind of approached me. So you might see your face everywhere, but the agreement that you have beforehand, all these conversations beforehand, even just a, hey, heads up, I might license some of these images. Because then the model might say, you know what, my rate just went up. Because instead of me charging you $1,000 for the day, if you're hoping to possibly license these, well, then it might increase more. An experienced model will know to have these conversations beforehand to basically say, right, just like we would say to a client, they're going to say to us, well, what are you going to do with these images? Where are these images going? How long are you going to have them? I've had this conversation more and more with actors. I've been filming some, corporate videos, and they're like, where's this video going to be? How long do you need it? Because that's going to determine my rate, my overall rate for me to show up for the day, deliver my lines, and then for you to use my likeness anywhere. Or wherever you've kind of determined. So it's interesting, and there is no, again, there isn't necessarily like one set thing that's going to determine the answer to all these things. I make a joke anytime I teach anything is I tell everyone the answer to any question you have is it depends.
It depends. Yeah, and I think an important topic to talk about under licensing is exclusivity. And that's something, that your client probably should be talking about more than they do, but there's etiquette there in approaching exclusivity. So let's say you're doing a shoot for how do I say it? Maybe like a local winery or something in town or something, and you do that shoot, you create images for them, and they get to use the images. They might not ask for exclusivity, but I think it's etiquette in that, let's say another winery in the state needs images. They did a Google search, Connecticut winery photographer, and you came up and your image came up, and they want to purchase a license for that image.
Right.
That wouldn't be cool to sell an image to them. They probably wouldn't want to buy it, because
sure, but it's a hypothetical. Yeah.
Now, that means the client should probably be asking for exclusivity in terms of the industry. But now if Connecticut Tourism wants to buy that image, and you call up the client and say, hey, Connecticut Tourism, they're going to be like, yeah, sell it to them. Make sure they get that image because that's going to help us out a ton.
Right.
So there's that's also in the terms of etiquette, but also understanding what exclusivity is in terms of there's exclusivity in terms of you're the only person that can use it, and I can't sell it to anyone else.
Yes.
Or it's exclusivity for a duration, exclusivity for industry, or maybe it's just region. I don't care if you sell this image to a winery out in France,
right?
Because I don't see myself as competing with them.
Right. That's and those are you dive into those deeper conversations when you need to, right? And I think everything that we've been talking about is at least good food for thought for anyone having these conversations. You're right, because that exclusivity thing, it can almost be assumed, again, if we're talking about Adam's spatula, right? This is your spatula. It's a one of a kind. I'm photographing it for you. You're probably going to have exclusivity to that. Like, where else am I going to put this? Well, maybe Weber might want to use it. But then those are conversations that would come up after the fact. Because I have had that conversation when I talk about licensing images to even just a mom and pop. And it's like, well, why do I need a license? Like, where else would this image go? And it's having that conversation about the understanding of, well, where you're going to use it or where someone else might want to use it on your behalf. Or if there is the ability, right? Because I wouldn't necessarily license it to another winery. Like, why would I do this? Is your winery and it's very clearly your winery. Like, it wouldn't make sense. But like you said, Connecticut Tourism might want that. And that's another kind of point to bring back up, is that Connecticut Tourism would talk to you about that, not the winery. This is Adam's image, not the winery's image, to license to Connecticut Tourism. So
I was looking up something online about licensing, and they were describing like a retail photographer or a wedding photographer may take a picture of at a reception, or maybe someone taking a picture of their friends with their iPhone by a pool. They take a step back and fall in the pool. It's this amazing shot, and it could be this unbelievable ad for the next iPhone that's waterproof, or the existing iPhone that's waterproof.
Yeah.
They may want to license it. So what are the issues there, and how much do you sell that for? And there's extreme value to that image.
Yeah. Chris brought up, I'm just trying to keep up with some comments that come up here. So Meg had a question. I'll come back to that, but Chris mentioned, going back to the real estate, don't homeowners sign a property release before the shoot anyway? That I don't know. I haven't worked in real estate photography enough to know. I would think that they would, the agreement with the listing agent to basically say like, hey, I'm allowed to take your pictures and use them where I want. So basically a property release, right? And a property release would exist for all kinds of properties that you would want to, like that winery we were just talking about. Hey, you need to give me, rights to be able to use this image for my portfolio, or again, negotiate those terms. So yeah, releases are important to get for people.
Yep.
And for properties. And I learned from Jenny that a dog is a property release, because a dog is identified as property, not as a person. So if you need to get an image release for a dog, you get a property release because the owner of the dog needs to sign that. So that was a fun fact. Fun facts. And Meg's question was, I can't scroll back for some reason, but if I remember it, Meg, if you're still listening, basically what she said, well, how would you approach a conversation? How would you approach a client that you've already been doing work with, that you haven't had a license agreement with, to now saying, hey, you need to license these images? How would you approach that?
That's a great question, and that's a sign that a photographer's, learning best practices, and
Yes.
they're getting, becoming more skilled in knowing their, creative assets, their creative value. And I think, in so many of these instances, it's have an honest conversation and say, as a creator, I'm starting to learn about valuing my intellectual property or creative assets, and the value that I'm, hopefully providing you. And I'm so glad that we continue to work together, because my goal is to continue to, make you successful, because if you're successful, it's going to be more work for me and I'll be successful.
Right.
One of the things I've recently learned about is that photographers should be licensing their images. So for future contracts, I'm going to be including the licensing. A fair, starting point for a license for a local, company like you is maybe 2 years, this type of usage, and this is how you've been using my images in the past. The only change that you might feel this has is, let's say you choose to, you fall in love with an image and you want to associate your brand with it so much that you want to put it on a billboard and put it everywhere. That's my goal, that's my hope, but I think I should get compensated for that.
Yeah.
At that time. I don't want to charge you for that now and make it unlimited. I only want to charge you for that if you're going to use it on the billboard.
Yes.
I don't think I should have to charge for you, now. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times, the client is going to say, absolutely, we totally understand, great. You might have a client that says, wait, we've been getting unlimited use for, I don't want to have to pay, I don't want to have my images, the usage limited.
Yeah.
I was paying you for those images. I own those images.
Right.
And it's, well, actually you own a license to use the images. It's still my copyright. I own the intellectual property, but you have a license to use them. So these are tough conversations, and that's a great question.
Yeah, and that's because that could very easily turn into just like, hey, I want more money for nothing. Like I want to charge you more money for doing nothing different, but it isn't. It's the term resetting those expectations. They had a certain way that they expected things to be, and now it's resetting that. Hey, I know this is how we did things before, based on things currently that I've learned, or based on things that the way that I'm approaching my business now. Here's how we're going to have things moving forward, and I just want to give you a heads up and make sure you're okay with that. Whatever questions you have, Meg said great advice, and I agree. I think that it is that kind of vulnerability, that honesty of saying that without saying like, hey, I didn't know, I wasn't supposed to do this, but no, hey, as I'm progressing and learning, here are some things that I've encountered, and I want to just make sure that you understand how we're going to do things.
And my advice would be to write the new license for the new work that you're going to do with that client, in a way that they're able to use the images in the exact same way that they've been using them in the past. But you're going to say, hey, the only difference here is I'm protecting myself, or I received some counsel that I should protect myself in the event that you align your brand so closely with this image that you want to really push it and put it out there for a huge
If you're a restaurant and I took this awesome picture of a burger and you just wanted to put it on your Instagram, like take the picture of the burger, but now they start making these frozen burgers and they want to use that image on the packaging for these frozen burgers. Whoa. Now we need to have a different conversation. It's that kind of approach. You don't necessarily have to paint that picture for them, but you might have to just, again, hopefully this conversation that Adam and I are having gives you a little bit of insight into a way that you might be able to approach having those conversations. Like here are the ways that licensing should be thought about.
Yeah, and your goal isn't, your goal is to continue serving them the same way that you have, and to
Yep.
them, you say in your eyes, you shouldn't feel or see anything different in the
No.
way that you're using the images. The only difference is that, my hope is that you're going to get huge and you're going to have 50 chains in the next year. And when you do, I'm going to ask you for a little bit more compensation when you're marketing 50 chains as opposed to one,
Yes.
one
And,
location.
and that should, right, that should be totally fair. That is fair. It's not should, it is fair. um, cool. All right, so I'm just looking over my notes because I know we've got a little bit more time. We talked about some music stuff. Um, yeah, I think we covered most of the things, and I'm glad there has been a lot of active chats. I'm just scrolling back over here,
Yeah.
and any other things that you could think of, Adam, that you would want
Yeah,
to,
and
please.
as a ASMP board member, I want to give them a plug.
Oh,
And
please do. No. And you know what? It was on my mind to bring it up, but please dive in.
as a lowly photographer, I'm also often challenged by these issues, and it's like, how do I approach these challenging topics where sometimes I'm having legal counsel of a client scrutinize my licensing agreement? How do I gain support in being knowledgeable and protecting myself, advocating for myself in the right way? And I often look to ASMP, American Society of Media Photographers, which is the professional trade organization, which always helps photographers in best business practice. As a member, you also have the ability to reach out to their on-hand legal counsel to ask them a question. So, part of your dues, if you're a member, go to asking questions like this that are really difficult. It's been a huge resource for me. Obviously I'm plugging them because I'm on the board and I feel so strongly that it's helped me become a better professional, but it's a huge resource.
Absolutely. I mean, I would absolutely second that notion. I recently joined and am on the board as of recently. That I I waited, I think, in my opinion, too long to join because I wish I had a little bit more insight sooner. But in all honesty, I had a Matt Branscombe, so he kind of was like my own personal ASMP. So
And that's probably even more so than the actual organization is building a community of professional photographers that you can pick up the phone and say, hey Matt, hey Steve, hey, what
yeah.
this client is asking for this usage rights for this cost or this, what do you think I should do? And those are invaluable.
For sure. I mean, for sure. That's right. Being able to have that. But to your point, ASMP is going to be there. And even when people have questions, and I know I've searched on the site for just like referencing licensing terms, understanding that information, right? Just with some searching through the site and even seeing examples. There was one that I saw, there was a photographer. So for those that are curious, what's nice about ASMP is that there are a lot of photographers that will contribute their estimates or their invoices for you to see like what an actual project looked like. And there was someone, I think it was San Diego photographer, licensed one image for $10,000. And it's like you see that number, and this is like a recent job. You see that number and you go, yeah, that's because, and then it shows where they wanted to use this image, what they wanted to do with it, and it was $10,000. And some people might think like, that's crazy. My client's giving me a hard time because I want to charge them $50. And this person did 10,000. Well, obviously, like we were talking about, there's that scale, right? But knowing that that exists and that's available and being able to reference that is good, because then it should hopefully reinforce your approach when you're having these conversations, or even just instill confidence in yourself that being able to make a living in this field, in this career, exists, and it's just a matter of how you approach it. So can you earn a solid living if you shoot for $150 and give everyone all the images? Nope, probably not. But being able to, as Adam said, right, reapproach those conversations with clients so you can have those discussions around licensing and what that looks like. It's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. And I think that... Go ahead.
There is so much talent out there. I look at photographers throughout Connecticut, and there's so much talent out there. But, some of those photographers who are so super talented are struggling to make it as a viable profession and make a living off of that. And I feel like the one differentiator between the people who are surviving as a successful photographer and supporting their family is kind of understanding these terms and being able to advocate for themselves with licensing, with all of these contracts and protecting their creative assets, their intellectual property. So it's really important to learn this stuff and be able to advocate for yourself if you want to be a career photographer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I was going to say before is that I think because the call them Instagram photographers, I put that in quotes because sometimes for whatever reason it has a taboo. You're a photographer, right? There's this sort of taboo topic, but the fact that you would and I also see a lot of collaborations where a photographer with a model want to work together. I hope that in that exchange that, again, the value is the same for each person, right? But if you're photographing for someone to use that image somewhere and make a profit, you in turn are also deserve a profit from that. And even though, and arguably, and here's the thing that the kind of my thought that brought me to this is that Instagram now is arguably more valuable than a television commercial, right? Like if my image is going to show up in a TV commercial, it's more valuable on Instagram because more people are going to see that because it is directly targeted to their exact audience versus it being on TV for 60 seconds to just whoever happens to be watching. So it's just funny how those conversations kind of change, right? Or even like printing in a magazine, like who gets magazines? Who has magazines? But print publication, right, usually was super more expensive than like, oh, just on your website? Yeah, that's fine. But now when you think about Facebook and Instagram, that image is going to the exact person that needs to see it because of all of the data and all the analytics that support to say, this image of that spatula is going to cooks, it's going to, in-home chefs, it's going to all these people that it should exactly go to. Whereas in that, People magazine that someone might see sitting in a waiting room somewhere, maybe.
So think of the value of an image in terms of the impressions or the eyeballs that are going to be on that image. And you could almost calculate the value of an image by the amount of eyeballs that will be on it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're selling to a client who has an Instagram following of 50 million people, there's more value in them putting it on that Instagram feed than there is on a billboard on 95 because maybe only 2 million people will see it on the billboard on 95, but 50 million might see it on the Instagram feed.
And that is very much the case of how influencers have become a profession, right? Is that they're saying, hey, I have a following of 50 million. This image that you pay me to take a picture. 100 million eyeballs that is specifically targeted to your audience. These are the people that, like, I am a chef. People look at my stuff because I cook. If I'm using your spatula, oh, that's worth a lot of money. That Adam spatula. I love that that's carried through the whole conversation. So it's just one of those things that when you think about that, just because it's going on, like, oh, it's just for our social media. Okay, well, in what way? That's a bigger conversation in many cases, right? Like, where is this going to be in a campaign? How long is this campaign existing for? All of those things. So being able to just kind of have this awareness in those conversations when you're talking about it. Going back to what Adam, thankfully, I'm glad that you stopped me just kind of rolling into things before I jumped over to 50, right? Is the conversation needs to happen first in the discussion. If someone says, hey, can you take pictures? You can go, absolutely. Cool. What are we taking pictures of? Great. Sounds like a lot of fun. How are we going to do it? Okay, cool. I can absolutely do that. Okay, where are these pictures going to exist? Where is it going?
Managing expectations is always important in photography shoots, and understanding that managing expectations with regards to what you're going to be able to capture for your client, but also how they're going to be able to use the images is going to help you create a good relationship with your clients.
That's it. It's all about relationships. Dope. I'm looking. I don't see any other comments. Adam, this was fun, man. I'm glad we got to do this.
Well, if we created a fun night out of licensing, then we're doing a good job. But no, I always love talking to you, and I think your talking about a topic that is so important, so valuable. But you're right. It's if we were able to have fun talking about licensing and helping out another photographer in the state, be successful and make it a career,
Yeah.
then you're doing a good thing.
Cool. And that is absolutely the idea, is let everyone rise up together so we're all on this level. It sets the expectation for everyone how we want to kind of conduct ourselves and operate, and that's where again ASMP comes in such a tremendous way. So for those that have questions, pop them down here or head over to asmp.org, and then just get more information. Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I love talking to you.
Absolutely. For sure. Thank you, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you.
Peace out.